Keeping Score, I've decided is the name. And and it's essentially going through the running back and wide receiver finishes each week and sort of comparing it to what their ADP was in the preseason to see where these players were drafted and how that relates to sort of zero RB, robust RB, if you took a more balanced approach, and like what helped you. Because it's easy to look at zero RB and be like, well, if you look at these season-long finishes, it means it's better. Or like the same with robust running back. You could find ways to find that. But fantasy is a weekly game. It's not a season-long game. So it kind of matters what the weekly results are more than the season-long results.
So you're saying if you win 1 week, it's more important than winning the championship season-long?
You need to win 1 week to win the championship. Breh.
So you only need to win 1 week to win the championship.
Yep, that's exactly what
Heard
I'm
it here
saying.
on Bench Stash.
Good,
if you
good.
won week 1, you have the ship. You're good.
Boom, that's it. I mean, I'm in a 1 week league, aren't you?
I'm already trying to blow up your segment.
All
Okay,
right,
continue.
All right, so here are the top 12 running back finishes, standard scoring. I didn't bring up PPR. If you want PPR, you can go find it yourself.
Don't be hateful.
Which
to
is
our viewers.
to the zero RB people is probably already diminishing it because it's kind of branded as more of like a PPR strategy. But I've seen plenty of zero RB people say no, it works in standard too. So that's So I'm going to go with standard.
I think all of them say that.
I think all of them. Okay, so number 1 was D'Angelo Williams, as we were talking about. He was drafted as the RB 32 in the 8th round. So he was not drafted as a starter. C.J. Anderson at number 2, he was drafted as the RB 13 in the 3rd round. So you drafted him as a starter. You probably started him last week. Spencer Ware as the RB 44, drafted in the 11th round. I will say, just to follow the trend, he was not drafted as a starter. You probably started him based off of all the news, but it's also possible that you didn't. That you're just like, oh, he's this guy. I don't know. Let's keep him on my bench. Theo Riddick, drafted as the RB 40, finishes the 4th running back, 11th round. You probably weren't starting him.
No.
Carlos Hyde as the 5th running back, drafted as RB 14 in the 3rd round. You were starting him. David Johnson as the 6th running back, drafted as the RB 2 in the 1st round. You were starting him. Amir Abdullah, drafted in the 7th round, finishes the RB 33. He was drafted as the RB 33, taken in the 8th round. You were probably not starting Amir Abdullah.
Yeah.
Danny Woodhead finishes the RB 8. Drafted RB 27 in the 7th round. You probably weren't starting him. Melvin Gordon is the RB 9, drafted RB 23 in the 6th round. I'll say that you might have started him. That's kind of like, basically, if they were drafted as a top 24 running back, I'm saying you started them because that's an RB 2. Number 10 was DeMarco Murray, drafted as the RB 19 in the 5th round. You were starting him. Matt Forte is the 11th, RB 15 in the 4th round. So you were probably starting him. And then RB 12, Jalen Richard. How do you say his last name? Is it Richard?
It's Richard.
Jalen Richard. He went undrafted in every league ever. So what this all means with this like slew of stats I just gave you is of the 12 running backs, the top 12 running backs this last week, 6 of them were drafted as starting running backs. So you were probably starting them and you got a top 12 running back performance out of them. Only one of them was actually drafted as a top 12 running back, which is sort of the narrative that helps zero RB as well. Of the top 12 running back drafted, David Johnson was the only one who finished his top 12, so zero RB works. Well, no, it's about who you actually started. And so of the running backs that you likely started, that you drafted, of the running backs you drafted as a starter, 6 of them finished as RB1s. So you had a roughly like a 50% chance of getting it.
That Jalen Richard, though.
That Jalen Richard came out. If you started Jalen Richard, you were insane. So looking at wide receiver, first was Brandon Cooks, drafted as a wide receiver 14 in the 3rd round. He was a starter. You started him. Antonio Brown, first overall, you started him.
Didn't start him.
Wow, okay. AJ Green finishes the 3rd, first rounder. You started him. Willie Snead finished 4th. He was drafted as a wide receiver 44 in the 9th round. Maybe you were crazy enough to flex him. You probably didn't. Larry Fitzgerald finished 5th as the wide receiver 28th. He was taken as a wide receiver 28th in the 5th round. You did not draft him as a starter. So we're going to say you didn't start him. Same with Jordan Matthews, who finished 6th, wide receiver 31, 6th round, not a starter. 7th is Will Fuller, taken in the 13th round, so not a starter. Mike Wallace was finished 8th in the 14th round, not a starter. Mike Evans is the next starter we get, a wide receiver 9. He was drafted in the 2nd round, so you started him. Doug Baldwin finishes 10th. He was wide receiver 21 ADP, so you probably started him. Kelvin Benjamin finished 11th, wide receiver 24 ADP. I will help out the wide receiver people and say you started him, even though you might not have. Mohamed Sanu was the last one, wide receiver 54 ADP. You did not start him. So, of those 12...
What about Amari Cooper?
Amari Cooper did not finish as a top 12 wide receiver in standard scoring.
I have him at 11 here.
Are you sure you're looking at standard scoring?
Yeah, he had 15.7 points. He actually outscored Doug Baldwin.
Hold on here. Let me see this. Let me look at my information.
And Kelvin Benjamin.
I have him as scoring 13.7 points.
Oh, he had a 2-point conversion, which I believe is counted in most leagues.
Oh, okay. So what I'm looking at doesn't include that. So in that case, well, Amari Cooper, it would have been the wide receiver 12 in that situation.
Yeah.
So, okay. And he was drafted as a starter. So before that, I had that 6 wide receivers were drafted as starters and finished that way. Now 7 if you have 2-point conversions in your league. So Amari Cooper. But basically what we're seeing is that it wasn't even split before that change. Now, even with Amari Cooper, there's only one more wide receiver that finished better than running backs. So essentially, 0 RB wasn't better, robust running back wasn't better. If anything, a balanced approach is what helped you the most in week 1. If in those first 5 or 6 rounds you took a mix of both of them, you had the best chance of getting a wide receiver 1 and an RB 1. So we'll keep this up each week, see how it goes. But as of now, it is a dead heat between 0 RB and robust RB.
And I will say that I like the segment idea, which was completely Leo's concoction.
Pulled it out of my
just
butt.
because of the climate within the fantasy community. I've never seen it so divided in terms of 0 running back is the best, 0 wide receiver, robust running back is the best. Now, granted, there are a lot fewer people on the robust side. It seems like the 0 RB, I guess, pundits vastly outnumber. I get most of the other strategies, at least from what we see on Twitter, from what we see on Reddit, a lot of these fantasy communities. It seems like a lot of people are going full steam ahead with the 0 running back. We'll see how it works out season long. I mean, like you just said, week 1, it was about an even split before I blew it up with the Amari Cooper thing.
I had this whole spiel about, it's an even split, they're perfect. But yeah, I guess Amari Cooper with his 2-point conversion, man, just ruining everything.
Yeah, I mean, technically, Amari Cooper, I'm looking at it right now, he was a wide receiver 11. So Doug Baldwin was a wide receiver 12.
11?
So
well, you're just ruined. The segment canceled.
So that's it. Just blow it up. No, it's still the same. I mean, 5 and 7 is a fairly even split. I mean, guys that you drafted to be a starter. 6 and 7. 6 and 7.
How dare you?
6 and 7. I mean, that's as close as it gets.
Yeah.
I mean, we had guys like Willie Snead, Will Fuller, Mike Wallace, Mohamed Sanu that blew up. Guys that you would never expect to blow up. And the same in the running back category. You had, your Theo Riddicks. You had your Spencer Ware. Although, even though Spencer Ware's kind of borderline for me, like you mentioned, because he wasn't drafted to be a starter, but because of the news, he kind of leaps into that starting running back mold. I mean, I guess because of where he was drafted, it feeds 0 RB strategy a little bit more.
Yeah. The argument is like, as this guy that you drafted to be a starter, did he finish as a starter? Basically, did he finish as an RB1? And maybe unless you drafted like right before week 1, you weren't drafting Spencer Ware to be a starter. You were drafting him as like a handcuff or an upside bench guy, and then it just so happened week 1 he blows up like a diaper.
But as you just mentioned as well, there were quite a few of those wide receivers that if you drafted them in the later rounds, you were just as well off as if you did the 0 running back strategy. So there's no winner in week 1. I saw this happening on Twitter. 0 running back clearly won because of what Spencer Ware and Theo Riddick did. But then they conveniently wanted to ignore the fact that Willie Snead was the 4th highest scoring wide receiver. Or that Will Fuller outscored DeAndre Hopkins. Or Mohamed Sanu outscored Julio Jones. Right?
Yeah, it's very like, bias supporting the narrative. That was sort of what inspired it, was seeing all over Twitter the like quote tweets of like, oh, like David Johnson was the only running back, drafted as an RB1 who finished that way. It's like, oh, 0 RB all the way, but it's just as volatile on the other side. I will say that there were 3 players drafted as wide receiver 1s that finished that way. So, I mean, that's better than 1, but the problem is it's not just about you drafted them as an RB or wide receiver 1, so that's where they need to finish. It's just about where did the starters you drafted finish.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, Brown, Green, and Evans, they all had big weeks. It will be something interesting to monitor season long to see how this plays out, because this is a year where we're going to see a lot of conflict between the fantasy community. Fantasy community. I mean, like you said, people are going to be twisting facts to fit their own narrative. So you really have to look at both sides. Even if you're a proponent of 0 running back or robust running back, you really have to look at the full picture. I mean, you have to be able to admit that you are wrong on certain things.